مرحبا جميعا.
Hello, everyone. We will start the next session. This session is entitled Overcoming Legal Complications, Mechanisms for Supporting Journalism. We have 5 interventions, 5 speakers. This session will identify gaps and structural flaws that allow the targeting of journalists and silencing them, and we will try to identify and discuss urgent legal measures and necessary measures to protect journalists from targeting and the crisis of impunity. I'm very happy to have with me 4 speakers. I will start with Alexander Papachristou, the Executive Director of Cyrus Vance Center for Global Justice. Thank you. We will also have with us Claudine Redfern, Executive Director of Reporters Shield. Also, Marta Cabrera, who is a lawyer at Media Defense, and Mr. Omar Luslati, who is a judge and head of the Committee for Managing Journalist Complaints at the Tunisian Journalism Center. Let's start with Marta. Marta, since you are a lawyer in the sphere of human rights and you work in an organization that is focused on journalist protection, I wanted to start with you on what are the legal gaps that are utilized to attack journalists or exploited to hold them accountable in an arbitrary manner. And then what does the organization do where you work to protect journalists in this area?
Shukran, Hanene. Thank you for the question. What are the legal gaps? Let's start. At Media Defense, we focus on providing legal help and also financial help to journalists. For us, not only legal help is important, but also financial, because one of the let's say the main, like one of the things that we've seen the most right now that are facing journalists all around the world is facing the so-called SLAPPs. You know, there is this strategic lawsuits against public participation, where the goal of the lawsuits that are brought against journalists are not to win the lawsuit itself, but to exhaust them, to exhaust journalists. Not only mentally, of course, but also financially. So there's where Media Defense comes into play. Not only that, I wanted also to tackle the topic of violence against journalists. That's a global problem. We work, as you know, Media Defense works globally. So violence against journalists is something that we see in Latin America, that we see in the MENA region, that we see in Asia, everywhere. So what we try to provide them is also with financial help, helping them covering the legal costs of lawyers when they want to initiate proceedings. The problem, and it's a problem not only in the MENA region, which is huge, but also in Latin America, we've seen that a lot, is the impunity rates. Impunity rates when it comes to violence against journalists, they sent a message. They sent a huge message, which is that violence against journalists is tolerated. So it's not only about providing, of course, redress to the victim, redress to the families of the victims, but also to get those perpetrators convicted. So, so that's also one of the main works of Media Defense. And also thinking about the legal gaps, I would say we've seen when it comes to prosecuting journalists, especially at the MENA region, we've seen like that the criminal proceedings are the not only civil proceedings but criminal proceedings are the proceedings that are being used the most to prosecute journalists, and again, that also sends a message, because sometimes in the end there are criminal lawsuits which are unfounded, but the fact that the journalists has the threat to face prison, or a journalist being in pretrial detention for years. We've seen that. Being in pretrial detention under unfounded charges also is stifling like dissent, no, and the work of journalists. We've seen the use of laws such as cybercrime laws, for instance, or for instance, like I mean, freedom of expression can be restricted. There are legitimate goals, no, legitimate aims that allow states to restrict freedom of expression, and one of them is national security. What we have seen is that national security is being used like let's say, like an excuse, no, to criminally prosecute journalists for every action, for every time they cover a protest, for instance, or they issue an article, they manifest their opinion, they are being criminally prosecuted. So those gaps in criminal law are being used by states to restrict freedom of expression.
Thank you, Marta. سأتي لكلوتيلد.
I'm going to come to you, Claudie. This legal siege, financial siege specifically, that is imposed, the trials last a long time, so they exhaust the journalists in time and money and those who defend journalists. As for the organization where you work, Report Shield, what do you do to protect journalists? This organization, what is the type of support, legal support that it offers to journalists, and how can we communicate with you for those who want to enjoy your legal aid?
Shukran, Hanene. So Reporters Shield is unique in that it's a proactive, preventative strategy against the ongoing legal costs of legal defense. For anyone, to answer your last question first, for anyone who wants to get in touch, my lovely colleague Amani Hamami is manning the Reporters Shield stand throughout the conference here, and has also left our contact details and a little postcard about our program on your tables. The way it works is it's a membership program. So newsrooms from all over the world can join Reporters Shield, pay a modest annual fee according to their risk profile and how much journalism they publish and how big their newsroom is. And then when they, or increasingly when they are sued, they can then come and claim some legal cost coverage from the mutual defense pot, which we maintain on behalf of our members. So it's basically a mutual defense fund that was created by journalists for journalists. And when our members come to us because they're in trouble, we are then supported by a wonderful partnership with Alex's team at the Vart Center, who have been delivering legal services to civil society for several decades. And their network around the world is made available to our members in their defense.
Thank you, Clotilde. Alex, كيف تستطيعون الوصول إلى هؤلاء الصحفيين؟
How can you reach these journalists, especially since in the area of legal trials in many countries, it is difficult for the organizations, especially lawyers, to reach these countries because the system of justice and aid in these countries is complex. It could not allow maybe for the protection of journalists, maybe it doesn't allow the provision of this legal aid, this legal support. So how do you act based on the organization that you work with to provide legal aid to journalists?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Wonderful to see you here. And eager for your questions later, even now. Please do interrupt. We should really talk with each other, not we to you. So we very much believe that lawyers in the countries where journalists face the threats must be the ones to respond in defense of the journalists. And in fact, it's necessary. I, as an American lawyer, a New York City lawyer, cannot go to the court in Amman and defend a journalist. It's not allowed. And also, I wouldn't be able to do it. So we, as Clotilde said, my organization has a network of lawyers around the world with whom we've worked in the past and today, and we call on those lawyers to assist members of Reporters Shield or clients of ours. Sometimes it's the same thing. Our clients are members of Reporters Shield. You need to have the expertise and knowledge of a lawyer in the place where the journalist faces the trouble. Except there are some, in some parts of the world, regional bodies where lawyers from other countries can intervene. So, for example, in Latin America, there's a very brave media manager, journalist, Jose Ruben Zamora, now in prison in Guatemala, in prison now for quite a long time, simply because he has been a brave, courageous, independent journalist reporting on corruption and other malfeasance in his country. We work with his lawyers in Guatemala in the court proceedings there, and I think Media Defense has done that too. But we also have brought a case in the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, which has some authority over Guatemala because of treaties that Guatemala has signed. And so in that case, we are able to work ourselves on behalf of a journalist facing serious threat. The Arab world does not have such a body, a regional human rights body to which people can go. There is an African court for people and human rights where you can go. There in Europe, you have the European Court of Human Rights. So the Middle East, the Arab world, lacks this mechanism. There are mechanisms internationally, United Nations mechanisms, to which one can appeal from an Arab country. I have to say those are not very effective, but they are present, and they are possible ways for a journalist in the Arab world to seek justice outside of her or his country, in some cases, if necessary. And we are able to help with that as our lawyers from Media Defense, and Reporters Shield could potentially be of benefit in such cases.
Thank you, Alex. سأمر إلى عمر الوسليتي.
So I'm going to go on to Omar Waslati. Legal tools to defend journalists also raises the issue of ethics, respecting journalistic ethics. Typically, journalists are accused, or the doorway of accusing them through oppressive regimes is failing to respect the ethics of the journalism profession. And you are a member in the Council of Journalism, head of the Complaints Committee, and the Journalism Council is an entity that works on the ethics of journalism. How can we prompt journalists to defend themselves or protect themselves by respecting the ethics of the profession?
شكرا. صباح النور للجميع. في الحقيقة مهم جدا أن
Thank you very much. It is very important to talk about supporting journalists. Support is always directed at very complex legal issues, because the status of journalists around the world is always at the opposing side. So the laws typically are dispersed, and typically the laws are used that are not proportionate or not appropriate for journalists. So they use laws on terrorism, personal matters, and so the journalists are in an area of shade. So the lack of legal knowledge, legal training in climates that are against journalists and freedom of journalists. So with the weakness of legal awareness, journalists commit problems or mistakes from a legal standpoint. They are deadly, that make it even more difficult to defend them in court, because journalists haven't respected ethics. They weren't professional. They were more emotional They were conveying ideas and images and the situation without following ethics or ethical rules imposed by the profession. And so lawyers face many difficulties in persuading the court that this journalist had good intentions. And they truly did have a good intention, but the laws, even if they assume good intention, there are still the rights of others, those who are affected, witnesses, the place of the crime, or publishing things that are confidential to the investigation. So I go back to the Journalism Council. It is the second phase for protecting journalists, because in Tunisia, it's a voluntary organization. Its members are volunteers, but they focus on the right of the public to good information. And they urge journalists, professional mistakes will cause journalists to be prosecuted, so to speak, by the council, and citizens can submit complaints with the council on the pretext of not respecting the ethics or the rules of the profession, especially in handling, specifically in Tunisia, our experiences on not enabling people to respond. Journalists treat problems or issues of corruption. They talk about corrupt people without them being there, without giving this assumption of presumption of innocence. And so this makes people who are affected to resort to the council to submit complaints. And we call on the journalists to come. We hear from both sides, those who are affected by the content that was published, whatever type it was. And then we confront him, we remind him of the ethics of the profession, and this method is ideal so that we don't get to the courts, because if the journalist gets to the court, the accountability will be more difficult and the accountability will struggle from a legal standpoint. Perhaps there are criminal penalties, because there are provisions, especially in the protection of personal data and information. There are penalties that could rise up to 6 months in prison. And so the council plays an important role in supporting the ability of journalists and reminding the journalists of the rules and ethics of the profession. And this is the first line of defense, reminding them, reminding the system in the state, let's allow journalists to correct the situation before we get to the courts and the complications of the courts, complicated procedures and difficulty in defense. Thank you, Omar. You're allowing me room to return to Marta. Marta, Omar spoke about ethical violations that journalists may commit, and thus opening the door to filing suits and complaints against them. In your organization, have you had examples where journalists were committing mistakes? So there were violations in terms of not respecting the ethics of the profession, which opens the door for attacking them and weakens their standing before the law. And can you give examples? So from a case that you've handled, or that was, the subject of public opinion?
Gran, thank you very much for the question. First of all, we believe in media defense, as Omar was defending, on self-regulation proceedings before coming to before courts, because as he stated, and we've seen that in our experience, domestic courts are being used to silence journalists. Like, the main interest is not to talk about ethics, but to talk about silencing them through that tool. We at Media Defense, we provide, as I said, financial assistance when it comes to this kind of cases, but we also are involved in strategic litigation, sometimes, especially before international tribunals. Alexander was talking about the Inter-American Court, the European Court, UN mechanisms. And we represent victims before these tribunals, but we also act as amicus. We send amicus when we find strategic cases, meaning cases that will not only give redress to the victim, but can change, can cause systematic changes in the region. And that's something that we have particularly seen at the Inter-American system, because as you may know, the reparations that are declared by the Inter-American Court, they can make systematic changes. No, they have changed the constitution in Chile. They have made governments to enact new legislation. And coming to a specific point of where Media Defense has sent an amicus was the case of Moya Chacon versus Costa Rica. There we sent an amicus. It was a case dealing with journalists making mistakes when they were delivering news, no? Because we firmly believe that journalists are allowed to make mistakes, no? Sometimes the standard of real malice can be applied, but also there are also other standards that may be applied. One of them is the standard of reasonable publication, and it's in connection with what Omar said, meaning that that if a journalist proves that he or she conducted interviews that went to the sources, did all this, followed all the deontological rules that he or she has to follow, or even he or she, even if he or she committed mistakes, there is absolutely no reason for that journalist to be punished. So that's something that we defended in Moya Chacon, and if you see the judgment, it's also in English. Hopefully at some point it will be in Arabic. We will also fight for that. You can see the legal standards, and those standards that are set in that judgment, they are being replicated in other future judgments by the court. And also, if you see the judicial dialogue that is between the Inter-American Court and the European Court and the UN system, that those standards can create an influence on other courts.
Thank you. Clotilde, هل تواجهون نفس التحديات فيما
Do you
يخص
face the same challenges in defending journalists? For example, the journalists themselves don't respect ethical professions, a lack of a knowledge of the law, so that they commit mistakes that are used against them later on. Have you faced challenges also in terms of penalties are not proportionate to the type of mistake committed by the journalist?
Definitely the actual identity of a SLAPP suit is usually that the claim is completely disproportionate to the harm that has been caused. And the reason that is the case is because they very rarely expect to end up in court and fight you. The plan is to intimidate you with such a large financial bill that you will capitulate straight away for fear of having to close your newsroom and pay and go bankrupt as a result of a fatal legal cost. So that is the risk that newsrooms are worried about when these huge bullying lawsuits land on their desk. And the way that Reporters Shield is trying to counter that silencing, chilling effect is by giving them preventative strategies. So we have a three-pronged legal assistance strategy of prevent, respond, defend. And the preventative part is where we try and educate our member newsrooms in exactly what are their legal responsibilities, but also where are the loopholes or the legal risks that might lead to a potential lawsuit. So we offer legal risk assessments of any investigation taking into account or looking into a business or an individual in a high-risk jurisdiction. Why is that? Because if you may be based here in Amman, but doing an investigation on an American or a British business that has activities here, and you realize that there's some corruption involved or malfeasance in how they're dealing with their finances, that business or individual, if they have a legal standing in the UK or the US, they can sue you there, regardless of the fact that your newsroom is not there and even your audience is not there. And so that's the unique selling point of Reporters Shield, is you have this global coverage for this kind of libel tourism that happens when somebody with enough money just wants to silence you. They will just leverage whatever court system they can. But we offer preventative strategies to try and support the newsrooms in not letting themselves open to these risks. And then the second legal assistance we offer is the Respond service. And that is taking away from the newsroom the headache or the fear that you may experience when you receive one of these very intimidating legal letters. You hand them over to your case officer, at Reporter Shield, and they liaise with our legal coordinators at the Vance Centre, and they will find the most qualified lawyer. And that may be your own lawyer. Our own members recommend their own lawyers all the time, but they don't always have one. They don't always have access to that expertise. We will allocate the best possible lawyer to defend you, and that lawyer will then draft a robust response letter quickly, so that the plaintiff or the person trying to sue you will know you have access to expert legal assistance. You will fight the case if they do want to take it all the way to court, which usually they don't, they just want to silence you. But if it does go to court, then that's where our third legal strategy comes in, the defense service, and we will defend you in court and we will pay your lawyer's fees if you're a member of Reporter Shield.
Thank you, Clotilde. I come to Alex. هل في منظمتكم
In your organizations, is there a part that relates to restricting the capacities of journalists in terms of legal knowledge of orders and laws that protect them in the event that cases are filed against them? This is my first question. And my second question is, how do you educate the journalists on your presence? Because there is a problem. I myself just recently came to know that there are all of these organizations to protect journalists. Usually, we don't get information on the existence of such organizations to resort to them, we as journalists, to protect ourselves. So I think that the point of communication is very important in your work.
Thank you. Here I am with you in Amman, Jordan, at the Arij conference. This is how we reach out to our friends in Arab media to offer our services. Not just this conference. 2 weeks ago, I was at the Global Investigative Journalism Conference in Malaysia. And I go to many other conferences wherever they are. It's exhausting. But it's beneficial to me to find you, and I hope to you to find us. We provide legal services to Arij itself, and through Arij to members of its network. We provide legal services to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, ICIJ. Some of you may be members, and so from ICIJ you can find out about us. The Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, OCCRP, is another client, and its member centers also we help, and so forth and so on. We have clients around the world who will let you know about us if you don't already. Here you are, so you know. And then to your first question, if I understand it, we provide information about laws to clients if they ask. Sometimes we will initiate information to our clients. But I'll tell you, the most useful education about the laws occurs during the process of pre-publication review. When you have a story to be broadcast or published, we encourage you to come to us or other lawyers and ask the lawyers to review the story from a legal perspective, especially if you are saying something quite critical, negative about a person or a business in a position of power, a wealthy person or a big company, where you could face a real risk of being sued. You shouldn't publish that story or broadcast that story and say, let's see what happens. You have the opportunity to get a lawyer to read the story first and tell you what the lawyer thinks is risky in that story. It takes a few days, and maybe you're in a hurry to publish your story. Well, I think you should wait a few days and find out from the lawyer whether there is something in that story that could lead to a lawsuit, maybe in your own country, maybe in Clotilde's country, the most dangerous place to be sued, the United Kingdom, or in my country, the United States, also not so good to be sued there, or Australia, that's bad. also. And each country has different risks, and we could talk about that, but not now. But you look at your story and you say, aha, I'm writing about a British person. Oh, I'm writing about an American company, an Australian company. Find a lawyer in those places. We can help you find lawyers in England, in Australia, in the US. We can do it ourselves. We'll read the story and we'll teach you about the laws of each of these countries through the experience of reading your story and telling you, in the United States, if you say this, you could have trouble in court. You might want to say it a different way, and then it's okay. Or maybe you should take it out because you don't really have enough information to say it. Now, we're just the lawyer. You don't have to listen to your lawyer, right? The lawyer's not the boss. The lawyer is your advisor. And so give that lawyer a chance to give you advice, and then ignore it if you want. That's fine. But at least you know what you're doing, and you have a bit of education in that very practical way. So I would invite everybody to reach out to Media Defense, to Van Center, and if you're a member of Reporters Shield, you don't even have to do it because they'll do it for you. Find a lawyer, and that lawyer will help you understand the laws of the country where you face a risk. And don't think that it's only your own country, because I'm telling you, the real risk is that you get sued in London, and then you're going to spend some years either paying lawyers, if you probably can't afford it, I can't afford it, or through Reporters Shield getting a lawyer paid for you. How's that? Okay? All right? Get a lawyer.
Thank you, Alex. This is a good communication, by the way. Yeah?
Thank you.
أعود إلى عمر وأنتم في
I'll
مجلس
get back to Umar. You in the Journalism Council, you play the role of the mediator between the people and journalists in order to avoid getting to court proceedings. Nevertheless, I believe that particularly in our countries, in Middle Eastern countries, there is a number of campaigns to demonize journalists, and there is a discourse of hatred that is being broadcasted against journalists, and some are trying to make journalists look like they are guilty in terms of all what's happening in their countries. So I wonder, how do you work in your council in order to restore the people's confidence in journalism? Because I believe that there is a crisis of trust between journalism and the people, and regimes, particularly the dictatorship ones, they feed the discourse of hatred and absence of trust between the people, the audience, and journalists. So how can we restore the confidence of people in journalism so that we reduce a number of litigations or cases against journalists? Thank you, Hanan. I would like to get back to the idea raised by Alex regarding seeking advice in advance regarding some of the contents that might harm the journalist. Sometimes in certain environments whereby the cost of the lawyer is really high, there are certain environments that are against journalists. So journalism will incur a huge cost. I would like to thank Media Defense because they offer a huge support to journalists by paying for the lawyer. Nevertheless, journalists may be able to access some figures that might provide them with pro bono legal services. There are some syndicates some entities that can offer the journalist the chance to seek the help of a certain lawyer to provide support, not during litigations, but before that, pre-litigations. So I don't know if, or I believe that several journalists have resorted to that to seek advice before they publish. So I'll refer back to the council and its role in restoring the confidence of people, of audience in journalism. The objective of our council is to work according to professionality. The audience will trust journalists more when they are professional. You need to render information as is, facts as is, without propaganda, without overreacting. You should not be overreacting and just to go in a hurry in order to have a scoop. So when you start publishing misleading facts, audience will start looking at you as journalism of propaganda or over-exaggerating. This is why they will lose their confidence in you. Nevertheless, the council opens the room for the audience to fight such a thing. So as if we are dealing between or mediating between the audience and journalism, because before the council there was no relationship at all between newspapers and the audience, for example, because newspapers, they do not have a journalistic documenter who would receive the complaints of citizens regarding the content. The editors-in-chief, for example, inside some newspapers do suffer problems. Are they transparent enough? Is there accountability within press institutions? Is there press accountability, not necessarily judicial accountability? So in absence of such procedures, the council comes to play the role of some sort of an entity that find justice and right thing, right of audience to look into certain values, like to have a journalist who would come and write an article, for example, against justice, or a journalist to express an opinion that is against the values that the community believes in. Here comes the role of human rights organizations and different societies to complain against this journalist who broke certain values and certain ethics of this profession. The journalistic ethics that do enhance values of transparency, equality, justice, and so on and so forth. Now the audience has a space or a council that can receive their complaints, and there could be pre-accountability before getting to the legal accountability that I believe is risky. And we allow the audience not to resort to the judiciary when they come to the council, and when the journalist apologizes officially and allows the citizen and the different associations the right to respond, and when they correct that on time, in this case, we reduce number of legal complaints that may have risks against the freedom of journalism. Thank you, Omar. Marta, I'd like to ask you, you represent 3 associations from 3 different countries. How do you coordinate amongst these different organizations in order to protect journalists? In other words, how do you exchange experiences amongst yourselves? How do you coordinate pan borders, across the borders, in order to look into the unfair legal mechanisms against journalists and also to resist the culture of impunity?
Thank you very much. At Media Defense, we believe that networking is the base of resilience when it comes to facing all the threats that are currently facing journalists. So, for instance, we use networking. We use our partners. First of all, to get in touch with lawyers at a domestic level. For instance, every time, I don't know, a journalist from Yemen comes to us, or we had a recent case from Argentina, a female journalist who was facing lots of criminal proceedings against her, and she was in need of a lawyer. So what we do, we reach to our partners, and we ask them for lawyers working, in the field, to provide them with this first, let's say, like the weapon at the first level. Then we act. The second level would be at the international level. But that on one side. We also fund organizations. We're specialized in legal aid, as you know. So if you have, or if you happen to know an organization that is about to build a legal aid unit or has already a legal aid unit who needs financial help, we are also able to provide you with help. And we also do capacity building And I wanted to talk about capacity building because thanks to Arish, this conference, we have been able to carry out a litigation surgery. So that's how we call them, where we share knowledge. We share our knowledge from an international perspective, but the participants share knowledge with us about their experience. They are mostly lawyers. And what I found also very useful is that after every litigation surgery, either in Costa Rica this year, for instance, Costa Rica, Namibia, or now here in Jordan, we create a network of lawyers so that they exchange knowledge among themselves and with us. So every time we are in need of a lawyer, we have now like a network of more than 500 lawyers all around the world. So every time we are in need of a local lawyer, we can reach to them.
Thank you, Marta. Clotilde, I will ask you the same question. سأسألك نفس السؤال.
I will ask you the same question. How do you coordinate, first of all, with local organizations or local and domestic lawyers whom you work with? And how do you coordinate amongst yourselves as international organizations in order to support and to offer legal aids to support journalists?
Okay, so Reporters Shield is a membership organization. There's huge solidarity between our existing members that number just over 60 now, and we're trying to grow that membership every year. The membership is open globally, which means all the newsrooms that are part of Reporters Shield, they learn from us and our existing network, but they actually feed into the network too, because they are always recommending lawyers that they know from their work in their localities. They are also increasingly interested in speaking to each other about how they deal with difficult investigations that they wish to publish while protecting their newsrooms. So there's just a really lovely solidarity between the members of Reporters Shield. We bring them together at least once a quarter to share their experiences of how they're dealing with their own lawsuits. They exchange notes. I think, frankly, the moral support is undervalued. You know, it can often feel very lonely when you're on the receiving end of a lawsuit, particularly if you haven't done it before. I think that's why Alex was so adamant about the preventative need to talk to lawyers before you publish. If you haven't been sued, you may underestimate just how horrible, expensive, and lengthy it can be. It's much, much better to prevent and to talk to each other and to connect between newsrooms and the lawyers that support them.
أليكس كنت مؤخرا في المؤتمر.
Alex, you've been recently in the global conference for investigative journalists, and definitely you met with a good number of journalists. What were the main problems or requests? What have they mostly talked about in terms of protecting themselves? What have they asked you for as an organization?
Thank you. It was an interesting experience there to meet journalists from Southeast Asia in particular, but also from Africa. Journalists came from all over. You journalists have a very tough time. I don't have to tell you. You can tell me much more, I'm sure. It's not just about being sued in court or being dragged to the Media Council in Tunisia. It's about every day coping with insufficient resources, not enough money. It's about the fear of being harassed online or in person, of being surveilled, followed, perhaps wiretapped. We hear about all of these methods of Pegasus and other infections of your devices. Threats, legal, physical, and on all the rest. It's a tough profession because it's a lonely profession, as Clotilde said. You necessarily operate on your own. Maybe you have a team of people, but it's probably a small team, and you're competing with the other teams. You know, you want to get the story first, and you want to get it best, and so it's lonely. But let me give practical advice, if I may. Break the loneliness by forming partnerships with other media in other countries or in your own country. One of the ways to get legal protection, so I don't say this as a psychologist about loneliness, no, I'm not. I'm talking as a lawyer. Legal protection comes from partnership with other media. You'll see Arij publishing a story along with The Guardian and Paper Trail Media and Der Spiegel recently on US and German snipers working for the Israeli Defense Forces. Fantastic story. That story was published in the US by The Guardian, in the UK by The Guardian, in Germany by several partners there, and here in the Middle East. That will make everybody involved safer. So when you have a really good story, but you think, oh my gosh, I'm going to get sued for this, or I'm going to get threatened for this, right? Find partners in other countries who will publish that story with you and reach an agreement with them first. And then, again, you need a lawyer for that maybe, or not, right? But have an agreement there. You publish on the same date. You respect each other's sources. You don't reveal your partner's sources. The partner doesn't reveal your sources. You don't protect the other partners from being sued in their countries, and they don't protect you from being... There are elements to these types of co-publication agreements that are standard. And have protection from partnership. That's not just a practical strategy, it's a legal strategy, because you'll reduce the chances that you will be sued by yourself and have to bear the cost of defending it by yourself. In fact, I think you'll reduce the chances that you'll be sued at all. Because if a story comes out in 5 different countries, it's less likely that a person defamed in that story will sue in any of those countries, and certainly not in all 5 of them. And likely you will be the smaller of the publishing partners, right? You're going to team up with larger media in other countries. They are more likely to be sued than you. So a practical strategy for the psychology, but more importantly for the legality, make partners.
Thank you very much, Alex, for these advices. We just have like 4 minutes more. بالعربي. مازال لنا تقريبا
We have less than 10 minutes to open the room for questions. If any has a question, please go ahead.
أشكر. أنا اسمي يحيى شقير.
I'd like to thank you. I am Yahya Shqir, the former president for the Committee on Media Compliance in Jordan. I am really enjoying the session. I enjoyed a lot what has been mentioned by Mr. Alexander, along with his pieces of advice and how your pieces must be reviewed by legal experts pre-publishing. But sometimes we need to keep in mind that under the pressures of work, we can't share every single thing, particularly if there is live broadcasting, for example. Second of all, we shall keep in mind that there is a huge storage of punitive laws in most of the Arab countries that are waiting for journalists to step in this trap. I was in the Council of Media Compliance, and that experience was mainly related to self-regulation amongst journalists, and I'm afraid that that experience was not really successful because the journalists or the people who were negatively affected by the trespassing of journalism against their privacy that they are benefiting. Some people prefer to resort to the judiciary so that they will have the journalists imprisoned for a couple of days. Thank you. Is there any other question that we can receive? We may receive 1 or 2 more questions. Good morning. I am Amal Assamid, a Tunisian journalist. Actually, I would like to raise a question to Mr. Omar Louislati in terms of the council. Now, today, before discussing maybe the efficacy of this council in terms of how is it related to journalists, I would like to raise a question. To what extent is the Tunisian audience nowadays aware of the value and the role of this council, whereby they may complain through this council, maybe in order to amend or adjust some of the journalistic work done by journalists in order to avoid courts? Thank you. Just a remark in 40 seconds. Working towards establishing a journalistic council, self-regulated one, we don't have the option to self-regulate. So we need to go to the Ministry of Media and Information. Can you explain what the Ministry of Media is? It is a ministry for oversight, censorship and propaganda, actually. This is the main role of any minister of media. In Tunisia, we resorted to the option to have an amendment entity that will amend things in our regulations, just like laws, and to have self-regulation by journalists themselves. I usually do not thank, but now I'm going to thank the new composition of what has been done by Ms. Hanan and Mr. Omar. Wish you the best of luck. Thank you. Is there any other question?
Alex,
Okay, Alex, if you want to answer, please.
the first question.
The first question. Yes. Well, look, from my perspective in the United States, the idea of a media council is strange, right? Self-regulation does not mean that journalists appoint a body of other journalists or media managers to tell them what to do or decide whether they've done something wrong. In my experience, from my perspective, self-regulation comes in only one way, that is what you publish and what the other people publish. So you publish a story and other people think it's wrong, they shouldn't complain to a media council or even go to court. They should publish a story about how your story was wrong. And that's the proper mechanism for self-regulation. Journalists should speak only through what they publish or broadcast. And journalists should never sue other journalists or anyone else. You have a very powerful mechanism, which is your voice in broadcast or print. That is more powerful than a court because it reaches more people. And you should use that voice, your publication or your broadcast, to correct what other people say, to be brave and say something yourself that may be wrong, but is still important. And wait for somebody to correct you. And as I say, that correction, in my view, should not come in court, but it should come in someone else's publication that says what you wrote was wrong. And that is the marketplace of ideas and of speech, and it should be free and not regulated by media councils or ministries of information or anyone else. That's just my view.
Omar, 30 ثيم يا عمر.
شكراً.
And then we have Marta and Clotilde.
اوكي شكرا بالنسبه للتجربه.
Thank you. Pertaining to the experience of the media committee in Jordan, and whether this experience can be evaluated as a failure, because these experiences are still at the primary stages, so we should not call them as failed, because the people, the audience trusts in nothing but in judiciary system, and definitely we need to look at what we do, and we need to keep going. Maybe after 20 or 25 years, or maybe after so many generations, this council and this committee and what you've done within this committee would be of significance to the future generations, and like future audience may be more aware of the role of these councils. As for raising awareness amongst audience regarding press councils, here comes the role of journalists to introduce this council. The first thing that the journalist needs to do is to raise awareness regarding such commissions and councils. The journalists themselves, they have the media tools that can introduce this council to the people, to the audience, so that they can have pre-adjustment tool before going to litigation.
There is another idea, and there is inviting the journalists to understand the laws that are harmful to journalists so that they know how to deal with them during publication. Thank you, Omar. Marta and Clotilde.
Journalists. In 30 seconds.
Very, very quick intervention. I just want to share my view on self-regulation. I would, in my view, like I'm speaking as a person, I would agree with Alexander's approach in terms of self-regulation and how it should work. And that's why media defense don't cover, it's outside the mandate to cover legal fees for journalists to sue other journalists. That's completely outside our mandate.
Yeah, my last words are just to join Reporters Shield. You will receive legal support, financial stability for the legal costs, and editorial courage to print the work you really want to print.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our speakers. Please get rich to them to have legal assistance.